So what we'll be doing today is to start on looking in some detail at one of the greatest texts in the Tibetan tradition, completed in 1402 by the great scholar saint Lama Tsongkhapa, who's also the founder of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism, the latest school to develop. It's a very extraordinary text, quite long. It would take quite a few months really to complete it properly. Let's see how we go. We'll start with some introductory topics today that are mentioned in the text itself. And then maybe by tomorrow, towards the second part, possibly of tomorrow's session, we'll begin to look at the topic of the precious human life. And this will complement what Nikoji is doing in the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning analytical meditations. Nikoji has already been investigating the first topic traditionally in this text, the how to rely on the spiritual guide, how to rely on a guru. So we won't start with that one. We'll be mentioning it, of course, on and off. We'll start with precious human life tomorrow. And today we'll look at some basics regarding this text, why it's so important, what are the advantages, and perhaps we'll also remind ourselves of some basic instructions on our attitude and how to listen to such a text. However, we'll start with posture and motivation and some silent meditation as usual. That will be beneficial. So wherever we are, please be relaxed, still, and with attentive mind. Let it be an uplifted mind, because actually, however we may be feeling, physically, or sometimes one can feel a bit low for whatever reason, we can still uplift ourselves with the thought that what we're going to be investigating today is something taught by incredibly awakened people, an awakened being. It has the power to really propel our minds in a wonderful direction. It has the great ability to show us exactly how to create the conditions, all the inner conditions, to begin to study, practice a path in a very authentic way, a way that can bring beneficial results. So this is something, I think, which can make us feel this is worthwhile. It's something very worthwhile. So we should be happy about that. So let's start with remembering how, for example, just in this whole Delhi area, with about whatever they say, about 29 so million people now, how many of them are just carrying on with their lives to survive, really, to go from one experience to another, looking for pleasant experience to avoid sorrow, suffering, and how all of them wish to be happy, don't want to suffer at all, but due to really a tremendous lack of understanding and application, vast majority of these beings have no idea how to create causes of lasting happiness and joy, and how to eliminate the disturbed states of mind that are arising continuously. So we can remember people we're close to and the people we don't know, imagine them, and think how wonderful it would be if they could experience happiness and its causes and really begin to understand why they are in pain, why they are feeling unsatisfied, and be able to work with that, get to grips with that. How wonderful that would be. Extend a sense of concern, responsibility. That as a member of the human family, may I feel more and more sense of connection with others and a wish to be of benefit to them. Recognizing also that a life lived just for oneself alone doesn't really qualify as a mature, sort of wholesome human life. It's very limited. It's said that Lord Buddha himself, at one point, of course, in his past, deep past, he was also an ordinary person like us, often primarily concerned just for his own happiness. But through practicing the path, through cherishing others, and through seeing through the illusion of an independent, solid self, he completely woke up and created all the causes for Buddhahood, which is also your potential, our potential. It's also the potential of every single being who at this moment may be wallowing in ignorance and so forth. Every one of the beings This universe can wake up completely at some point. So let us do what we can for ourselves so we can be of some benefit to others as well. We can spend a little while with breath, simply being with the in-breath and out-breath without getting caught up with wandering thoughts, which we can just let go gently and without any tension, just come back to the breath, sense of letting go with the out-breath. So thank you, everyone who's here and everyone at Tushita. I'm sorry if some of you got the message late. It was sent on time, but apparently it didn't arrive till after 11. So thank you. So, as I was mentioning earlier, we'll begin to take a look at this extraordinary text today. And tomorrow we'll get on to probably the topic of precious human life, which is one of the early topics in this text. Let me say a little bit about it, quoting the great American scholar Bob Thurman, who some of us know. He says this is really one of the greatest texts of Western spiritual civilization. It has an extraordinary scholarship. Here, imagine this 14th, early 15th century Tibetan saint scholar Tsongkhapa is quoting the Buddha. He's quoting numerous Indian Buddhist sources, the Indian scholars, for whom he has nothing but tremendous admiration, just as the present Dalai Lama has. He has put something together in a graduated way that is easy to understand, relatively easy to understand, meaning if you were to look at the Buddhist teachings, hundreds of volumes of teachings, hundreds of volumes, including the commentaries by Indian and Tibetan scholars. And it would be impossible for us really to work our way through it. We wouldn't know where to begin. So the greatness of this Lamrim, or stages of the path, lineage of teachings, is that it sets it forth in a way that we can practice, we can study and practice it without too much difficulty. Yeah. It started with the great Atisha, and there's a whole chapter on Atisha in Lama Tsongkhapa's text. We might briefly take a look at that, because Lama Tsongkhapa very carefully introduces everything. He not only introduces the teacher, he introduces why the teaching is great, what is the greatness of this kind of teaching, how to listen to these kind of teachings, and then he goes into the main topics. He also speaks about the meditation session, how we're supposed to meditate. We may have all sorts of ideas about that. He goes into it very thoroughly. So we'll begin to look at this. Yeah. And hopefully those who are interested, you'll read more and you'll take authentic commentaries from the great lamas who exist, and it's studied in our organization, the FPMT. So one can take those studies online. And there are, as I said, amazing commentaries now, even in English. So this text has really been opened up and is there for us to look at these days, which it wasn't there in English 40, 50 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. A team of 16 translators has put this together, really good translators, pretty much all of them from the United States, none of them from India, fortunately. So hopefully one day this text may also be there in Hindi, for example, but it isn't yet. Something was started and then it petered out. It's a very big task. Herman says that this text puts together not only the sutra teachings, but it approaches them and has aspects of also the Vajrayana or tantric teachings, although it doesn't teach tantra explicitly in this text. It teaches the sutra subjects from how to rely on a guru up to emptiness and the bodhisattva activities and so forth. But still, it's presented in a way where one can begin to get a feeling for the Vajrayana practices. This becomes obvious if you study the text quite thoroughly. You'll see the aspects of visualization, relying on light, purification, and so forth. That is also there in this text. What he says, Thurman says about the author, Tsongkhapa, is worth looking at in detail. We don't have time for that here, but here is someone who was already an extraordinary person by all accounts. From the time of his birth, he showed amazing signs and was able to very quickly assimilate the teachings his gurus gave him. He was a remarkable intellect, really remarkable child and a young man. He had 50 gurus in the course of his life, from whom he received the whole range of Buddhist teachings that were available in Tibet. But despite the fact, you see, that he was such an extraordinary person, he still insisted to go off and do a whole set of very, very intense purification and accumulation practices to purify negative energy and accumulate positive energy. He went to some of his closest disciples to a very remote spot where they did a lot of this practice. It said that in his life, Tsongkhapa, who I guess he passed away around the age 62, 63, he had performed 3.5 million full-length prostrations, right? That's a lot of prostrations. Full length, yeah, not the small ones we do often when we come into the Gompa. So he did that. He offered 10 million mandala offerings, which is something you can see if you go to Bodh Gaya, people offering the visualized universe using grains of rice or semi-precious stones and so forth. He did that practice, countless Bodhisattva mantras, countless guru yoga practices, and so many other practices. His point was, I think he's trying to get across to us, that if we want to really get to the depth of the teachings and create the cause for enlightenment, we have to engage in a tremendous process of purification and of accumulating positive energy. It's like if we were really very sick, a doctor would give us a very intense regime of medical treatment and wouldn't just send us away with a few aspirins or paracetamol. He or she would really give us something very deep to do. So Tsongkhapa did all of this, and his teachings have benefited in the 600 years since he wrote them, benefited the Tibetans, the Mongolians, very much so the Mongolians. Also now, of course, Westerners and Indian people are benefiting from the Stages of the Path teachings. So millions and millions have benefited from this. And we are now the happy recipients of this, largely due to one Mongolian Lama who had studied in Tibet, going to the United States in the 70s, opening an institute there and teaching some very interested, dedicated Westerners and introducing these teachings to them. And many of them have become the translators for this present text, this present version. So see the cause and effect there of how it's taken a Mongolian who studied in Tibet, early 15th century text by this great scholar saint, and now that it is benefiting us in the 21st century. And hopefully will do so for quite a long time, because there are some very, very good practitioners of this. I'm not a qualified teacher really of this text. My only reason for sitting here is I was asked to do it. Plus, I quite enjoy doing it, I suppose. And I have received these teachings on this text quite a few times from different lamas, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Choden Rinpoche, and of course, most of what Lama Zopa Rinpoche taught, a lot of it anyway, was based on this text. So, this particular text comes from the tradition of Atisha. He was somebody who was a prince, present-day Bangladesh. He was born near Dhaka, grew up in a princely role, but was very early drawn to the Dharma He ordained as a monk around the year 1000 AD in Bodh Gaya, and he took a lot of teachings, showed extraordinary talent and great learning and mastery of the teachings. He heard that there was a very great teacher of the compassion lineage, compassion teachings, residing in Indonesia. So Atisha took the very dangerous sea voyage all the way to Indonesia to take teachings on compassion bodhicitta from Serlingpa, who was residing there. It took years, months to get there, and spending time there, months to get back. He did that, and it said that Serlingpa was always one of his favorite teachers. He would always, if he ever heard the name of that teacher, he would put his palms together and pray. Such was his devotion to that great being, who taught him about compassion, taught him about opening up his heart to others, helping him totally dissolve selfishness, which is what is harming us, self-cherishing attitude. That's what's harming us. Yeah. So Atisha was, the story goes, he was circumambulating the great temple, Mahabodhi temple in Bodh Gaya. And there are many statues there, including statues of Tara, the female Buddha. And it said that one of these statues, which is very renowned, it actually spoke to Atisha. Now, this is not just some mumbo jumbo. Many contemporary lamas also speak of this, how there are statues that for a person who is ready, they can receive teachings from a statue, because statue, of course, is just stone or metal, but who knows what kind of being or awakened energy can reside, so to speak, in that particular place. Anyway, I don't want to go into all of this. I just want to say that Atisha had no intention of traveling much. He was a renowned scholar at Vikramshila Monastery in Bihar. Nobody wanted him to go anywhere. But Tara told him that he should go to Tibet. The Tibetans need you. The Dharma had already reached Tibet in the 7th, 8th centuries, but already within 2-3 centuries it had degenerated in many places, especially the Vajrayana tantric teachings had degenerated. And so Tara said to him, you better, you should go to Tibet. You must go to Tibet to help them. If you go, it will reduce your lifespan, but you should still go. It's going to be so beneficial for people, so beneficial. So how could he refuse? His own students and scholars at Vikramshila, of course, didn't want him to go. So as a gift to them, in a sense, to placate them, I believe then he wrote the Lamp on the Path to Enlightenment, Bodhipata Pradeep, which is one of the earliest Lamrim texts, which is what the Tibetans then based their whole Lamrim tradition on, based on the Bodhipata Pradeep of great Tisha. Yeah. So, as I said, there's a whole chapter here on Atisha. We don't need to go through that. But the reason Tsongkhapa is giving it is to show the excellent lineage of these teachings. They're not just, pulled out of a hat. They're not just, Tsongkhapa was bored one day and he thought, let's start writing something. He based it on Atisha's work. Atisha spent, I think, 17 or 19 years in Tibet and was greatly beloved of the people there and is renowned in all the traditions. There has been sectarianism in Tibet between the different schools, but everybody is very happy, I think, with Lama Atisha, who propounded these teachings on the stages of the path. One of the important reasons that these teachings, one of the important facets, let's say, is Atisha's treatment of what he calls the path of the three types of being, the three scopes or the three capacities. He speaks of three levels of practitioners. Yeah, he speaks of the small capacity person, and that person is, he says, somebody who has studied enough, who has enough understanding, little understanding of karma and future lives to be very concerned about karma and its results, and is very concerned to have a good future life, not a suffering life, not a life in a suffering realm. So the small capacity person is careful to practice some basic morality, study the teachings on suffering, karma, and to create not create negative karma as much as possible, create positive, learn about the causes that create a human life, practice them, and so forth. And these are given in detail in the text. How to, for example, create the cause not just to be human, because to be human is good, but as we know, there are plenty of human lives that you and I wouldn't like to possess, right? But to be a human with all of the circumstances or practice, to have a good, kind of body and mind, and so forth, all these attributes need to be there to take full advantage, right, of a human life. So all of these teachings are there, and these are studied in particular by the small capacity person. Now, as we mentioned the other day, excuse me. As we mentioned the other day, one of the reasons approaching the Dharma can be a little bit off-putting and not as joyful for us as we would like, and can be, in fact, a little bit of a downer, is the proposition which was originally made by Atisha. His point was that, if we're someone who is just working for the happiness of this life, which is, of course, very understandable, normal, but if we're just doing that, just for this life, then we aren't a Dharma practitioner. So this is, of course, not very great news in one way. Then we're not really an authentic practitioner, he says. If we're just thinking about happiness of this life. So that isn't even a small capacity person, right? In terms of his categorization of three levels of beings who practice the path. You practice the path authentically, he says, when you begin to understand, accept rebirth karma, and act accordingly in order to create future life happiness, recognizing that now it's 100 years, we're working for 100 years happiness. That's kind of good, but we're just not aware of beginningless mind, endless mind, and so we're a bit limited. We need to really think about what's going to happen after I die. And that's also very important, not to squander this amazing opportunity as a human. Yeah, I hope this is making some sense, especially for people who may be hearing this for the first time. Although I doubt if any of you are really hearing it totally for the first time. If you are, well, good luck. Hopefully it'll be okay. Now, the second person I mentioned, small capacity. Middling capacity is somebody who begins to really try and understand, why am I suffering? Why am I in the jail of samsara? How does samsara work? This repetitive vicious circle of being born, then going through life, and then dying without really much control, having all these sufferings, birth, sickness, old age, death, not getting what we want, all of this again and again and again. So how does this work, So the middling capacity person, medium capacity person, understands this, practices in essence what are called the three higher trainings, yeah, morality, ethical way of life, concentration, really getting the mind into a state where it can be very focused, undistracted, and then wisdom. So ethics, concentration, wisdom, that being practices those very thoroughly, and on the basis of that, that person is able to then understand the deepest truth about how we exist, ultimate truth, yeah, of emptiness, and that liberates that being. That acts as a cause for the complete liberation of that being from samsaric suffering. Yeah. Of course, it won't make that being a Buddha, but it will make them free of suffering. It'll lead to the stage of being what's called an arhat. And when they die as an arhat, they will no longer have to reincarnate helplessly in samsara ever again. They will be free. Yeah. So that's amazing. But that's not the highest path. The great capacity person, path of the great capacity person, is someone who's basically practicing in order to attain Buddhahood for the sake of other people. That's the goal. I'm practicing, taking responsibility to save everybody who's suffering and lead them to Buddhahood. So this person develops a state of mind that's very hard for someone like me to even conceive. You know, I can, and maybe some of us can imagine feeling tremendous care and concern for one or two or three people, maybe a few more, you know. If one were a parent with 7 or 8 children, one might feel that way towards most of them or all of them. Some of us have very good friends or partners, and one might feel that way inclined towards that person. But you see here, what's being spoken of is a state of mind where a person is willing to devote not only their present life, but all their future lives to one aim of benefiting, of rescuing all beings from samsara, of guiding all beings on the path as much as they can, the path to full enlightenment. That they feel is their responsibility. They feel that from the depths of their heart, there's something very authentic, not something made up. So, you know, this is unusual thought here. Obviously, we have to start slowly and start in a way where it's kind of it feels a little inauthentic or like a facsimile, like a copy right now. But that's how we have to start, by thinking about it, you know, seeing very clearly the suffering of others based on our own experience also of pain and misery. And then we'll slowly, it is said, practice through the accumulation of positive energy, the purification of the mind. You know, we can get deeper and deeper understanding, realization of even this extraordinary mind of great compassion, bodhicitta. So anyway, Atisha speaks in brief in his text. It's not very long. His text is very short. He speaks about these 3 levels of persons who engage in the spiritual path. And of course, we start at the beginning. We may have a lot of tendencies towards great compassion and so forth, which is wonderful. But we still have to understand and practice from the beginning. We can't just jump. We have to be very thorough in understanding how to practice the whole path from the beginning. Partly also so that we can train others, teach others in it. You know, that's important. So I suppose anyone who really wants to benefit others, and one takes the medical example again and again, it seems quite a good one to take. I mean, Buddha himself is referred to sometimes as the great physician, the great doctor. You know, doctors train for many, many years to attain what they attain, right? So why should it be any less for us who want to be free of pain and save others from the pain of samsara, not just physical pain, not just bodily sickness. So that's why we have to go. Tsongkhapa goes into this very, very thoroughly. One thing he teaches at the beginning, or after discussing the greatness of the author, Atisha, and one thing we should mention here, which is part of the great Indian, I would say, wisdom tradition, which can help us also not to go astray, I think. These are teachings as I received them. Some of us received them from Samdon Rinpoche, very, very great teacher, still living. He spoke to us about what parampara really means in the Indian tradition. Parampara meaning lineage. Lineage. What is a lineage according to this tradition? Lineage means, first of all, the source of the lineage has to be an authentically realized being. It can't just be anyone who thinks they know something or is very articulate, knows how to give amazing lectures, starts a movement, and so forth. That wouldn't necessarily be called a lineage, an authentic lineage. It has to be someone realized. So from our point of view, Lord Buddha, and then the people like Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Dharmakirti, Atisha, all these people are considered realized beings. So it's not only the origin of the Buddhist teachings themselves have an authentic, we feel, realized person, the Buddha, but this particular genre, tradition of the graduated path teachings, they have as their origin Atisha, basically, and he is an extraordinarily realized person. You know, he qualifies as a realized person. And a realized person is, there are various qualifications for that in the tradition. One, for example, is an extraordinary one from our point of view. Before you can start a lineage like this, or genre of teaching like this, or write an authentic text like this, you're supposed to, of course, not just have tremendous knowledge and compassion and so forth. You are supposed to get kind of inner message, a very unmistaken inner message or vision from your particular Ishta Devta or your meditational deity or your guru, at least, giving you permission to write the text. So that's kind of weird, right? I mean, nobody nowadays writes some novel or something because they got, I dreamt of Charles Dickens or had a vision and he said, yeah, you should write a novel on contemporary hard times in India or something, Well, how many authors get that kind of vision, I was even reading, and it made sense to me. An author was saying, forget inspiration, just write. If you want to be an author, don't think of inspiration all the time. It's not there. Just start writing. So anyway, this is not like that. This comes from realized people who have had inspiration and vision of their own masters, their teachers, who have said, yeah, go ahead. You need to do this. People need it, that kind of thing. So that kind of shows us, I think, the incredible purity and intensity of these people's motivations. Incredible. I mean, this is something very unusual, okay? So an authentic lineage starts that way. The other attributes of parampara should be that it is liberating. It's not just interesting. There's plenty of interesting things around. So much. When one thinks about it, so many interesting books, so many interesting novels, so many interesting programs on TV, interesting, riveting. You can stay up watching that. But how many are kind of helping us be liberated? how many are liberating us? So a parampara, authentic parampara, has to have that attribute. The teachings have to give us the power, the ability to liberate ourselves from samsara, from the delusions, yeah, from the disturbing thoughts, afflictive emotions, especially ignorance. Has to have that power. Then another attribute Sambam Rinpoche mentioned was that it should also be presented in a way that can be understood by us. It is logical. You know, it can't be in some mystical language or, you know, some weird kind of, mystical formulas that we can't understand. You know, it can't be like that. It's got to be understandable. It's got to be logical. It's got to be presented rationally, in a way that people like you and me can understand and benefit from immediately. Okay, so this is good to know. Authentic lineage, realized source, it has to, I think Rinpoche said if it doesn't have the ability to lead you to liberation, then at least it should have the ability to lead you to good, you know, happy human lives where you're able to continue your practice. So the idea is that it is leading you in that direction towards liberation and enlightenment. And then it should be logical. It should be, when you read it, you should be influenced positively by the way it is presented. It should make sense. It might not be easy, but it's comprehensible. And the hard bits, they can be taught to us by authentic teachers. Because I'm not going to pretend I can understand well the emptiness chapter of this text, especially that chapter. But there are people, very realized people, who can teach those chapters and make them very understandable. Yeah. So the teaching is great because it is coming from an authentic lineage. It's also great for 4 reasons that Tsongkhapa gives. Are people very tired? Too many words? Any questions so far? Boring as anything, you know? You want a rock and roll song now? How are we doing online, folks? Are we okay? Of course, can't tell what's happening with these poor people online. Many of whom have very flattering icons. Okay, doing very well. Thank you, Suchaita ji. Someone responded. ठीक है, Jugantar, you okay? Jogi, ठीक ठाक? Not too sleepy yet. Shouldn't go to sleep. I may be, you know, sleep-inducing messenger, but the teaching is very authentic, and it's good if we listen. Okay, the greatness of the teaching. Why is it great? You know? Of course, we've mentioned some things, it leads to enlightenment. Okay, the greatness of enabling one to know that all of the teachings are free of contradiction. So it's because there's so many different teachings. If we don't read them in the right order or in the right spirit or taught them in an inauthentic way, we might come to think that there are tremendous contradictions in the teachings of Lord Buddha. You know, some teachings will say, it's wonderful to, it's just a gross example. Yeah, it's very good to be very detached from the world, very free of the sense objects, and to aspire to be free of this disgusting samsara and never have to be reborn in it again. These teachings are helping us to attain nirvana. These are very good teachings. You should practice these teachings. Yeah, because many people do practice these teachings. These are the teachings that are widespread in Sri Lanka, Burma, and Thailand, for example. The teachings which emphasize your personal liberation. They're taught by the Buddha, obviously for a reason. Now then, if you say, oh, but you know, I've always been more interested in Mahayana, you know, and my teachers have always said you should at the outset generate great love and compassion. You shouldn't think of your own liberation alone. That is actually quite selfish. And some teachers do even use those kind of words. But then you have to understand. You have to understand how something that is relevant for one person isn't necessarily so for another. Not everyone can appreciate, digest, and practice the Mahayana teaching. Come on. You know, most of us aren't Mahayanists, whether or not we think we belong to a Mahayana school. The technical definition of a Mahayana person, or someone who has, is working, who is part of the tradition of wanting to attain Buddhahood, is that you're not a Mahayanist unless you've authentically developed this mind of bodhicitta we mentioned, that extraordinary mind, which renounces one's own aims, just one's own aims. One cherishes others, wishes to lead all others to enlightenment. He's given up the self-centered attitude. If we have that, we're Mahayanist. If not, we're still practicing. We're still working at it, taking it, but which is also useful too in the beginning. Yeah. So if we then say, oh, these basic teachings, they're below me. I don't need to train in ethics, concentration, wisdom. I'm a Mahayanist, I'm a compassionate person, and also I have my eye on Vajrayana. I'm going to be a great tantric practitioner, and this is just nonsense. It's very dangerous. Seeing there's a contradiction, apparent contradiction between what the Buddha taught some people, what he taught other people. We should never look at it like this. We should see how everything is appropriate for particular people at particular times. Buddha gave a very wide range of teachings. In some of his teachings, there's emphasis on how everything is only mind. Everything is just mind. In others, it's more nuanced, In some, he even seems to be speaking of some almost independent reality. In others, totally not. So it's all has to be understood properly. And these teachings, put them together in a way where we can see there is no contradiction, and how they, if possible, need to be practiced in a gradual way. And then we won't feel the contradiction. But that's one greatness, because otherwise we just go around, upsetting people, isn't it, who are practicing one way. We say that, that's not the real way. The Buddha taught better teachings than that. Why are you doing that? And many people who are doing the basic teachings are saying, oh, Buddha didn't teach these other teachings. They are later things that were invented by you Tibetans or Indians, They're not the words of the Buddha. So all of this can be a big problem. So this kind of text gets rid of that problem. 2, the greatness of enabling one to all of these scriptures are instructions for practice. Sometimes we think, oh, these big books with all these long passages, descriptions, that's just to be read, Practice is something else. Practice is what, our teachers teach us when they teach us meditation, Well, practice is what we do in the morning, meditations, Dr. Shifa is giving. What's taught in the afternoons is just theory. It doesn't have much to do with practice. So these teachings show us so clearly how all of the scriptures are actually how they can be used as practice instructions. They're not to be thought of as something theoretical alone. Then there's the greatness of enabling one to easily find out what the Buddha wanted to teach us. There's no problem here. It's so clear. If you look at the contents of the Lamrim, it is all so clear what we need to, practice, what the major teachings are, What did the Buddha want us actually to understand? It becomes very, very clear, very early on in the text, and becomes clearer. By the end, right towards the end, it's very clear what Buddha wants, which is what he's been saying all along, is that all of my teachings, he said, are to gradually take the practitioner towards an understanding of the ultimate truth so that they can, free themselves from suffering. This is one of the major intentions of the Buddha, obviously. And another, you could say, is to help us awaken our innate Buddha nature so that we ourselves can become Buddhas, not just free from samsara, not just in nirvana, not just the middling capacity person practice, but we can become great beings, great capacity people, practicing Mahayana, compassion, and bodhicitta. So this is very easy in a text like this. I only have the first volume in front of me here today, but in this volume, you see how the Buddha wants us to learn about meditation, understand misconceptions about meditation, how to meditate properly, what's the precious human life mean? Who are the three kinds of persons? We already looked at that a little. Death, mindfulness of death, how to do that, reflecting on what's coming later in our future life. What kind of future life can we expect based on the different causes we're putting into place? How to go for refuge? How do we go for refuge? To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, And if we do that, what are the precepts of refuge? What is karma? What are the general characteristics of karma? What kinds of karmas are there? And so forth. How do we cultivate ethical behavior in a proper way, sincere way, stable way? Then how do we really become very rooted in the attitude of the small capacity person at the outset, at least? We must become rooted in that attitude that I've got to create the conditions for a good future life. This is such a precious opportunity I have now. I've got to make it worthwhile long term. Then the 8 types of suffering. Then there's also 6 types of suffering. And then further meditations on suffering. So I think we're getting a hint there what the Buddha wants us to look at. Yeah, 8 types, 6 types, further meditations, just in case we didn't get the message. And of course, the Buddha's first teaching was dukkha, on dukkha. Then he doesn't just tell us we're really sick and we're in trouble. He's very kind. Then what's the origin of suffering? So then goes into the origin of suffering and the 12 factors of dependent arising. And then the attitude, what is the attitude, understanding of the person of medium capacity. So that's all there. And what's the nature of the path that actually leads to liberation? So then teachings on the 3 trainings. So in about 355 pages of English translation, these are the topics that are looked at. Very thorough, right? The next volumes are on the path of compassion, and special volumes are also there, special sections on concentration and wisdom. Yeah. So you read this, it couldn't be clearer what the Buddha wants us to look at. Couldn't be clearer. So easily we find the intention of the Buddha. 4th greatness, it enables us to refrain automatically from great wrongdoing. This has several meanings. It could mean, in a general way, that by practicing understanding these teachings, it prevents us from engaging in very negative actions, harming others, killing, stealing, and so forth. But what it actually means is more subtle. It is saying that when we begin to understand texts like this, we automatically will stop what they call abandoning the Dharma. We abandon the Dharma when we are disparaging towards it, when we misunderstand it to the extent that we start, seeing contradictions all over the place, or saying that, oh, this teaching is only for this kind of person, I'm not going to look at that teaching, so this teaching is good, this teaching is not so good. That is called abandoning the teachings, deprecating the Dharma. Although it's called abandoning the teaching. And there couldn't be more unwholesome action than that, according to the tradition. Something so precious, something so liberating, to abandon it by disparaging and so forth. This is something very dreadful. So Tsongkhapa says, to quote him, there are some people with misunderstanding who hold some teachings are methods for becoming a Buddha, some teachings are obstacles to becoming a Buddha. They then differentiate the words of the Buddha into good and bad, reasonable and unreasonable, great and small vehicles. Finally, they hold that some teachings are even to be cast aside, saying a bodhisattva should train in this, should not train in that. This way, they are actually abandoning the teachings. So the faults of abandoning the teachings are very grave. Yeah. There's some extraordinary examples are given in the teachings again and again. And I don't quite understand this, although, yeah, perhaps it's understandable. It says, the wrongdoing of someone who abandons the teachings in this way is far greater than someone who were to kill as many arhats, equaling the number of sands of the Ganga River. So the Ganga River probably has billions and billions and billions of sand grains, right? So you kill that many arhats, meaning beings who have attained liberation, it's not as harmful as abandoning the Dharma. I think I can't understand these kind of examples, to be honest, but I think it's kind of saying it's very, very grave. You kill an arhat, okay, an arhat anyway is liberated, it's not going to affect the arhat in that sense. But if you abandon the Dharma, you've abandoned your chance to liberate yourself and become a Buddha. You are really ruining your chances. Whereas if you kill beings, even arhats, can be more easily purified. Anyhow, the point is, these teachings are great because they show us how to practice. They show us they're not contradictory. They show us clearly what the Buddha meant, and they prevent us from abandoning the Dharma. So for all these reasons, these kind of stages of the path teachings are really very supreme, very supreme. Yeah, Suchaita is saying that sometimes it can be confusing reading things in Buddhist texts. Yeah, we have to look at context. We always have to understand the fact that Buddha was an extraordinarily compassionate, wise person who only had the benefit of the people in front of him in mind. Of course, all people, but especially if he were giving a particular teaching, he would also consider who is there right now. And so he had to give, different kinds of teachings to different people at different stages. Okay, so it's like that. And the greatness, the wonderful thing about these books is that we really do get the pith instructions in very clear language. Then, of course, once we know these basic things, and if we are interested enough, or I don't know, have the connection with different kind of teachers, it can be very, very useful then to also seek out slightly different kinds of teachings in the Buddhist tradition. There are many kinds of teachings. Some of the old school teachings of the Nyingmapas, they can be very refreshing and wonderful and useful. So long as we have a good foundation in these kind of basic texts, which are, I say basic, they're extraordinary, but they're giving us the whole foundational teachings of Lord Buddha in very, very palatable, understandable form. And one thing, of course, Tsongkhapa does, which most Tibetan teachers do, because of their tremendous reverence and gratitude to the Indian scholars. They're quoting the scholars all over the place. Tsongkhapa is quoting Indian scholars on virtually every page of this text. Virtually every page is quoting either a sutra of Lord Buddha or some text, some commentary by one of the authentic Indian scholars. I don't believe he quotes any Tibetans that much. Maybe he does somewhere, but mainly Indian scholars. Reminds one of the great Marpa, the translator, who was the guru of Milarepa. If you want insight into Parampara, if you want insight into the dedication of the Tibetans and their unparalleled devotion to Buddha and their Indian masters, then you should read the life of Marpa and how he came to India 3 times to receive teachings, collect texts, take them back in very difficult, often dangerous circumstances to Tibet to preserve the Dharma. The extraordinary dedication he had towards his teachers in India, especially one, Maitripa, but others as well. How he said that, the land I was born in was an inferior land, and the land I traveled to was supreme. He said 3 times I without thought for my life or limb, I traveled to India to receive the teaching, to sit at the feet of the great masters, and so forth. So this is actually very inspiring to read these things, especially when sometimes one sees or thinks about the state of education nowadays in the world, in India, the degeneration of the proper guru-student relationship, the authentic manifestation of that is very hard to find. To see it alive and well and how much it was appreciated, it can really give us some courage, I think, and insight, and what shall I say, willingness to be teachers and teach as much as we can, or at least, even if we don't think we're teachers, to have some kind of positive, inspiring effect on people, especially younger people who need some inspiration at a time when education has become, it's like, well, I don't know what words to use really. Just kind of assimilation of information in order to pass exams. Totally unsuitable for preparing us for life, let alone for developing causes for lasting happiness or liberation. That's not there in education. So anyway, this is really the true education. What Tsongkhapa is expounding here, this is the real education, because it elicits the qualities we have within us, the goodness, the potential for liberation and enlightenment. Ordinary education doesn't do that. So these teachings are indeed very, very great. The Tibetans, they are preserved and respected these teachings like nobody could. It's extraordinary. It's because of the Tibetan tradition that we have these translations. It's not because of Indian scholars or anyone keeping this tradition alive. It's because of the Tibetans. And they're Western students, not so much the Indian students, Western students so far. So that could be also something to, now it's changing, of course. There's some great teachers like Kishidoji Damdul and others who teach a lot of Indian students. So therefore it's changing. But up to now, it's mainly Tibetans, Mongolians, Westerners who are keeping this kind of tradition alive. So that's the greatness of the teachings in brief. In brief, it's all in brief. Any comments so far? Maniwana Tushita? Yes. 6, 7 people here, folks, and about, I don't know, 15 of you online. Sahil, clear? Is this helping to develop some feeling for these kind of teachings? Yeah. All students? Not too drowsy? Rebecca doesn't usually come to teaching. She's been away. Take care, Rebecca ji. Not making anger arise. And good. Yeah. Sometimes one can get angry listening to teachings because, well, it seems boring, right? But I think, yeah, that's why it's good, they say, sometimes to just read the biographies of some of the great teachers. It's kind of, they're like adventure, spiritual adventure stories. And they inspire us, which is why I'm saying Mapa's book is interesting to read, as are any of these great biographies, Milarepa, Naropa, Tilopa, and Tsongkhapa, and others. So many inspiring texts. Okay, so now there are 2 things. Excuse me. Oh boy. There's a chapter on meditation and refuting misconceptions about meditation, which is very important. Let me briefly go through the next chapter here, which is, we did a few times before, but it's interesting and useful. How to listen and explain the teachings. In general, one might say, I'll just quote something from here at the beginning. When I see the form of my misconduct clearly in the mirror of the teachings, I develop a feeling of regret and turn my mind towards the teachings. So it's like when we look at those powerful mirrors in the morning and see all the blemishes on our face, then we develop a feeling of regret and figure out how we can beautify our face in the morning, especially if we have that kind of job where we need to look beautiful or handsome or whatever. Similarly, when we see in the teachings so clearly, unbearably clearly sometimes, unbearably clearly where we are going wrong in the way we behave, the way we think, then we develop some regret, healthy regret, not guilt, healthy regret, and we may then be more likely to turn our mind towards the Dharma, towards the teaching. Okay, I'll go through this quite quickly. We've heard it before, although actually none of these things should be gone through quickly. Haven't I been saying so many times, slow down, pay attention? And then I want to go through things quickly. I don't know, there's a kind of a disease. I think it's partly a fear that if we do it the Tibetan way, people will get bored. People get bored, you can ask questions. You can interrupt. So maybe we don't go through it too quickly. You know, maybe not Rajdhani, but also not one of the worst rural passenger trains, something in between. So, how to listen to a teaching in which we've discovered that both the teaching and the author of it are great. So obviously they have to be listened to carefully. It's not just someone deciding to stand up on a soapbox and give a little speech or something. Yeah. Did you go to Hyde Park and listen to the people talking on soapboxes? Hyde Park, and maybe they don't do that now. People will give political speeches and other speeches. You know, you'd have some real weird person just standing up and starting to, you know, give a lecture on something, or you know, berating the government or something. Hyde Park. Anyway, maybe they've stopped that now. Not enough eccentrics in England anymore. All being standardized. Through hearing the teachings, phenomena are understood. Through hearing, wrongdoing is overcome. Through hearing, what is meaningless is eliminated. Through hearing, nirvana is attained. That's actually an amazing way to present things. We don't look at things this way. They're saying through hearing the teachings, these four things happen. Phenomena, we can begin to understand who we are, what we are. You know, meaninglessness is eliminated. Wrong actions are eliminated, and we attain nirvana. I mean, does it get better than that? What is better than that? I mean, this beats Netflix, Amazon, everything put together. Really. Of course, our minds need to be ready, but potentially this is what we can do through hearing, just hearing the Dharma. We're not even talking yet of reflecting and meditating deeply yet. Just through hearing it, we can understand how, you know, for example, meaninglessness. What is meaningless is eliminated. Worth looking at that. Through hearing, you will become faithful, and your delight in goodness and virtue will become steadfast. Wisdom will arise, your delusion will vanish. And this is worth buying, even with your flesh. If you had to sell some of your flesh for the Dharma, it would be worthwhile for this, right? That's what it's saying. Dharma is like a friend who's not going to desert you in times of need. It's a harmless medicine for the illness of sorrow. The supreme army to vanquish the troops of great misfortune, of great misdeeds. This is the best fame, glory, and treasure. You will be released with very little difficulty from the fortress of rebirth, which means uncontrolled rebirth. Yeah. So we should develop enthusiasm, Tsongkhapa says, from the depths of our heart with regard to these benefits of hearing, which were taken from the Jatakamala, Garland of Birth Stories text. There's many other ways that they teach this. One is, of course, that we have a historical Buddha in this eon, not just eon, but only 2,500 years ago, which is hardly much time at all. But there are time frames, there are times when there are no Buddhas at all in the world. For millions and millions and millions of years, no Buddhas appear in the world to teach in the universe, you know? At least not in this part of the universe. So then, you know, there is no Dharma. There is no path to liberation. Yeah. So, so they're rare. The teachings are like a jewel. They're rare because Buddhas seldom appear. They're like an eye because they lead to wisdom that becomes greater and greater. With that we will have illumination. We'll see the real nature of reality. And there'll be great benefit, because it'll lead to nirvana and enlightenment. And there's nothing beyond this. There's nothing greater than that. You know? So how should we listen? Free from arrogance, listening at the appropriate time, showing homage, deference, not being resentful, practicing according to the instructor's words, not just looking for the chance to argue, you know, not to belittle the teachings or the person teaching. One shouldn't even think that I'm not going to listen to this person. If they're giving an authentic teaching from an authentic text, one shouldn't say, I'm not going to listen to this person because he or she has fallen from ethical discipline. That's quite a statement, you know. So if your teacher occasionally drinks or dances or something like this, or someone who's expounding the Dharma, and you then think, oh, well, then I shouldn't listen to the person because they do those things, that would be a mistake. We respect the teaching, what the teaching means, you know. And while the person who's giving, at that time, they should be regarded as the representative, you know. They are the doctor, like a doctor giving the teaching, you know. One shouldn't think they are, oh, poor lineage, unattractive physical appearance, inarticulate, they speak harshly and unpleasantly. Don't worry too much about those things. Although, of course, it's a defect if a teacher does speak in that way. Of course, it's an issue, but think of the teachings. Remember the basic teaching on the 4 reliances. Rely on the teaching, not on the teacher. Rely on the words, not on the meaning, and etc. Remember that one. Then those who are listening should stay on a low seat. All of you are lower than me. That's very good. Then show reverence and listen to the teachings with clear delight and a mind undefiled, like a patient listening to the words of a doctor. Then we've heard the teaching before, the three folds of a container or vessel shouldn't be upside down. So it shouldn't be dirty. If it's the right way up, there shouldn't be dirt in it. And it shouldn't have a leaky bottom. So all these things shouldn't be there in a container. If you want to eat from that container, it shouldn't be upside down, shouldn't have holes in it, and it shouldn't have dirt, leftover food in it. So our mind should be the same way. Open, not closed, and we shouldn't be constantly entertaining various kinds of thoughts, contradictory thoughts, or just argumentative thoughts in our mind, or criticism while we're listening to the teaching. Should have an open, uncontaminated mind. So we need to pay attention, understand properly with a good motivation, and so forth. We must free ourselves from these faults. The 6 ideas we could also sometimes reflect on when listening to the teachings can be very useful, just as an aid to kind of stop and, because sometimes we just barge into a place, and if we're late or something, especially when you just start listening, but better to prepare the mind a little and think that I'm a sick person. Yeah. Think of the instructor as a doctor. Think of the instructor's explanations as medicine. Think of practicing. That's the way to cure our disease, practicing the Dharma. And then the 5th one, there's a lot of information on that one. Think of the Buddhas, or the source. Think of the Buddhas as excellent beings. And pray, aspire that the teachings endure for a long time. So it's interesting, isn't it? All these things we could think of. I'm sick. Well, that's not so difficult. If one looks at one's mind, occasionally one can understand why the Buddha says we're sick, constantly battered by the conflicting emotions. Yeah. Then think of the teachings as medicine. A sick person has a high regard for the medicine prescribed by a good doctor. So too, you should view the instructions and explanations that the instructor gives you is very important. Taking great pains to hold them in high esteem, not squandering them by lapses, such as forgetting them. Think of earnest practice as the way to cure your disease. Sick persons, intelligent ones, know they can't be cured without taking the medicine. So you take it. Don't just pile up a lot of medicines in your cabinet. So don't just pile up a lot of words in the notebook, but actually we should practice. This is quite difficult to do. The most difficult thing to do very often. Unless one's in a group setting where there's proper discipline and some kind of workshop or course, it can be quite difficult to remember to go over notes and the practices. One tends to just accumulate words. Wow, the example they give, Tsongkhapa gives, 1 or 2 doses of medicine will not do anything at all for lepers who have lost their hands and feet. Similarly, to put the meaning of the instructions into practice only once or twice is insufficient for us who, from beginningless time, have been struck down with the virulent illness of the afflictions. Of course, if we were really able to conceive of this, or even just of 3 or 4 previous lives, and to think how we have suffered in all those lives, it might become pretty unbearable to think of, about that, how we have been suffering continuously in so many ways, He quotes Chandra Gomin, who was a great Indian master, Chandra Gomin's praise of confession text. Our minds are constantly confused. We have been ill for a very long time. What is achieved by the lepers who have lost their arms and legs and only occasionally take medicine? So this is very good. If we really think of ourselves properly as a sick person, Tsongkhapa says, then we will, other positive ideas will follow from that. However, if we think this idea of being sick is just mere words, he says, then we won't put the meaning of the teachings into practice. And then we'll just have been merely listening to them. Some people are ill, says the King of Concentration Sutra, Samadhi Raja Sutra, very famous sutra. Some people are ill, their bodies are tormented. For many years, there's not even temporary relief for them. Afflicted with illness for a very long time, they seek a doctor in search of a cure. Searching about again and again, they at last find a physician with skill and knowledge. Treating the patients with compassion, the doctor gives medicine, saying, "Here, take this." The medicine is plentiful, good, valuable. It will cure the sickness. But the patients do not take it. This is not a shortcoming of the doctor, nor the fault of the medicine. It's just the fault of those who are ill. Likewise, after you've left ordinary life for the sake of these teachings and have come to know the powers, meditative stabilizations, and faculties, how can you attain nirvana without making effort at meditation? an effort at what is right. I've explained this very good teaching, yet if having heard it, you don't practice, then just like a sick person holding onto a bag of medicine, your illness cannot be cured. And this echoes Shantideva in his Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. What will be accomplished by mere talk? Will sick persons be helped by merely reading a medical treatise? Can help to, and teachers like Longsa Rinpoche make a big point of this one, that to pray, at least if you don't do anything else, at least for heaven's sake, pray that the teachings will remain for a very long time in this world to benefit others. This is something we must do again and again. So remember the benefits of teaching, eliminate the faults of wrong listening, listen with great delight. Then there's explanation of what are the benefits of explaining teachings to people, what sort of thought and behavior one should have while explaining a teaching, whom you should teach, whom you shouldn't teach. You know, things like, someone walks in riding a horse, you shouldn't teach them until they get off the horse, that kind of thing. They should be respectful. Shouldn't have big hats on, like ladies wear to the races. You shouldn't have that sort of hat on, that kind of thing. But I'm not going to read any more of the text today. It's 12:36 or so, and there may be some things people here want to say. The particular Lamrim text being discussed is in English, the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment. Kunal Agarwal asked this question. He is no longer there, or maybe he is. No. Anyway, it's the Lamrim Chenmo in Tibetan, the Great Lamrim, or the Great Stage of the Path. Yeah. When I was very heartened to see a little statue of Tsongkhapa and his two disciples, at least of Tsongkhapa, little statue in the Labrang, or the what's a Labrang in English? I would say the residence of a Lama. The Labrang of Zongsa Chense Rinpoche in Bir. I was most surprised and happy to see a little Tsongkhapa in one of the major shrine rooms there, which had, of course, other statues of his own lineage, pictures of his gurus, but Tsongkhapa was also there. And of course, Tsongkhapa was regarded, the author of our text was regarded as really an emanation of Manjushri. He's a very, as Manjushrian person. So obviously, he's very respected, actually, by many, many Tibetan Lamas of different traditions. And since the Chense Rinpoches are connected strongly with the wisdom tradition, makes sense that Lama Tsongkhapa should be there. And a brief allusion to it also in Rinpoche's text on Not for Happiness, where he mentions the basic text that one could look at, and he includes, I think he calls it the excellent text of Tsongkhapa. So this is a very noble, extraordinary, extensive, scholarly text, but one which is guided, is aiming at us, aiming to help us practice. It's not just for show, not for scholarship alone. helps us practice. So this is something very useful. Oh, Kunal, you are there. Okay. Thank you for the teachings. How does the Lamrim retreat help? Well, I don't know what you're talking about exactly, but if you were to engage in a retreat, going through the different topics of this graduated path over a month or a few months, then obviously if one is doing it properly, it would have some, at least you would then be someone who can say, at least I now beginning to understand the teachings, how they fit together, what the step-by-step approach can be, you know, rather than just taking bits here, bits there, and not really knowing how to put them together. Yeah. Now, yeah. Of course there is. Yeah, yeah. But what he's saying is, of course, that is understood. Hearing means one is hearing with intelligence at the right time, the right place, from the right teacher who can explain things if necessary. I think what they're saying is that hearing is the first step. If we can get into hearing, it's implied that these other steps should follow because that's how it's taught. So it would never just be left at hearing. However, of course, it does also say that, as you know, in the traditions, just to look at pictures of the Buddha, just to look at certain things or hear certain things is very karmically beneficial. You know, there are many stories of animals, birds, hearing the teachings, chanting, and so forth, and how it's said to have been highly beneficial for those beings and actually can ripen as great good fortune in the future. So, hearing the Dharma, yeah, when we understand what is Dharma, then hearing it is, I think, different from just dipping in the Ganga. However, if you're someone who takes a dip in the Ganga with great faith and devotion, then who's to say it's not going to have some positive effect on your mind? For sure it would have. Just as it has a positive effect to take a good shower in the morning when one's feeling sticky and dirty and so forth, you know. So of course, but if that's all one does, then we might say it's limited. But you know, there are people who with great devotion do these things, and it's obvious that they're getting some benefit, some peace of mind, and so forth. So there are people who get peace of mind by having a nice altar, by having a nice statue or whatever. It can have a beneficial effect on the mind. But of course, it doesn't compare with studying and reflecting and, you know, meditating properly, attaining realizations. That must be something so extraordinary. To actually know in the depths of one's heart that the teachings are valid, that they work, and that they are transforming one's mind. It's an extraordinary positive state of mind, which makes you feel really confident and wanting to share it with others. Speaking of sharing, since we'll be finishing soon, we could take a couple of minute break. There is some nice edibles in the fridge. They should be brought down and we can share. So otherwise just things stay up there for Nobody's staying at Tushita right now. Thanks, Nilasana. You know, if they're not satisfied with the teaching, then at least let them eat cake, you know, so they don't go away angry. Because if they go away angry, then not good karma for them or for me or anyone. Okay, खिलाओ, लोग खुश हो जाएं. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Nicola, you've done the basic program, right, of the FPMT. Is that right? Let me unmute you. You can unmute yourself if you're there, Vikoji.
Yes, I did.
I just wondered, do you have to do a Lamrim retreat as part of that course?
Yes, so for the people who study the basic program online, there is a commitment to do a 1 month Lamrim retreat. And for those who studied it residentially at Nalanda or Lama Tsongkhapa Institute, then there is a 3 months retreat commitment.
Okay, a 1 month or 3 month commitment. And how did you find the retreat, Nicola? Was it useful?
Well, I'm still in the process of doing it. I haven't finished the 3 months yet.
I see. Oh, you're going to do 3 months. Wow. Okay. Does it seem a lot of material to cope with, or step by step it kind of works out?
Well, the thing is that we've been advised not to read or study too much during the retreat, but more to, you know, focus on the outlines during meditation and really kind of analyze, but also to meditate on them single pointedly on each of the outlines, you know.
The outlines, yeah. Okay. So there are outlines which are given, which like a skeleton of the whole path. Okay. So that you're finding that useful?
Very useful, yes. And
Very
yeah,
useful.
I don't know if 3 months are enough to get any realization, but yeah, it's helpful to contemplate and deepen one's understanding of the teachings. Yes.
I mean, I know how much, and you know how much store Rinpoche put by this. He really said that we've come a long way in the organization, but what he really wants is for there to be more facilities for people to do longer this Lamrim graduated path retreats, yeah, and to attain realizations so that they become, you know, authentic practitioners and teachers. Rinpoche really wanted that, and it's hard. It's hard to get those conditions together. Yeah. So he gave me some advice last year when Rinpoche was still alive, which I'm beginning to put into effect, beginning to in a very small way. So he said to do 2 hours Lamrim meditation every morning. So that's something to work towards. Of course, apart from everything else, but that's how much importance Rinpoche gave to these teachings. You know? Yeah. So people here, please help yourself to some refreshments. We can continue some discussion for a little while. Nice to see you, Jan, old friend, dear friend from Australia, Jan Pepper. Have you ever done a Lamrim retreat, Jan?
No, never. Sorry. I've only taken many teachings. It's wonderfully refreshing to come back to the roots of where it all, is stemming from, and understand from the beginning again. So step by step,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to refreshing all the subjects I learned for many years. Probably forgotten most of it, sadly. I'm sorry, but yeah, no.
They're starting today, I think, the light of the path, what? Light of the Path retreat at Kapan. I
Yes.
think I saw a photo of Frank and Andy Melnick in Kathmandu. Nostalgia generating. So you don't have a chance to go to the teachings, Jan?
No, not at the moment. I'm relying on just Zoom meetings and things because my home situations.
Yeah.
So I can't go away anymore at this point. Not for
Others,
retreat or longer teachings, but
right. Are the teachings on Zoom? Those
yes,
ones?
His Holiness is coming up next week on the 5th and 6th of September from Dharamsala. So
No, I meant the Kopan ones.
Oh, the Kopan ones. The November course is of
No,
course, I think.
the light of the path, these present ones. I'm not sure.
No, I haven't checked out if they're on Zoom or not. I don't think so, but I'll check again.
Yeah. Wouldn't mind a piece of paper. If there is any, otherwise no problem. Thank you. यहाँ है नीचे ऊपर से मत ले आइए थोड़ा गर्म पानी no. Okay, Sandeep ji, Neil, anybody want to, or Naman here at Tushita?
So since we've been talking about getting
Angry.
little off topic from that, but
No, totally Lamrim topic.
so I think no emotion is like completely useless. So does Buddha talk about anger? How can we like channelize it into compassion? Or-
That's more spoken of in the Vajrayana teachings, but I suppose anger has a certain energy to it, right? So if one can look at the anger without looking at the object of anger and just allow it to be there as energy, I suppose that would be one way to just work with the energy of it rather than letting it take us over. And maybe after we've experienced anger, thank you. After we've experienced anger, and we've already, of course, had some. Bob, could you speak a little less loudly? Thanks. If we're exposed to our own anger and so forth, then afterwards a sense of regret can arise that I was angry. And I guess that could be channelized as a way to, just for example, there's this really, what can I say? This is my own particular example, but there's this Kudawala comes, this Kabadiwala comes along, rag and bone man, Jan kind of thing, comes around to collect garbage that one doesn't need. And he came around this morning also, unexpectedly. And I was a bit annoyed initially. He's very, what's the word? Obsequious, is it the word? Obsequious? Very, he's like kind of cringing, although he's a grown man. And he wanted some, me to give him some stuff, which he could then sell or whatever, resell. So initially I was a little annoyed when I saw him at the door. I'd been reading, preparing for the session and stuff. And so I sent him away. I wasn't full-fledged angry, but there's that kind of annoyance. Then I felt immediate some kind of regret. I went to the balcony, he was still there, and called him back. Because, when you think about it, poor guy, and I told him, you do this even on a Sunday? Itwar ko bhi karna padta hai ye sab. I felt sorry for the guy that he having to behave like that, go around early morning just collecting stuff so he can eke a living. So I called him back up and emptied another chamber of one of the wall cupboards. Okay, virtually everything, ledger. So yeah, one can have anger, but then or some state of mind which one can then regret, and then do something else. I was lucky he was still there, and I could just give him stuff, which of course he wasn't totally happy about. He always comes in the house and looks around, and not that he wanted the books, but other things. But yeah, when you put together, through just some investigation, you put together the fact you are angry and you may have upset somebody, and then you immediately just remember the basic teachings like suffering, right? So when you're angry, I'm suffering, but then if you can actually see, as one often can, how one's anger has made somebody upset, and one has done a little bit already of meditation on suffering, that helps, of course. Then you just feel rotten. You don't feel good. You regret. And then at least some positive thought could arise. You might not be a circumstance where you can give them anything, but one might say sorry, or one might do something. What do you think from your experience? Did you have anything from your experience you wanted to share?
Thinking about that, let's say I'm angry about something or something in life. So how can I channelize it into compassion? Like you were saying, like what if I was angry at this person, I was annoyed. But then I start feeling compassion, or I do something that is quite opposite of what I was thinking. That would I think it could provide discipline, sort of compassionate. Like you have to be empathetic because you get angry. Anger turns into a good thing rather than something that is regretted.
Yeah, I mean, rather than be the source of lingering resentment towards someone, one quickly uses one's Dharma understanding to understand how useless anger is, usually, how painful and useless and harmful for other people, as well as myself. So then it's easy to change the attitude. I mean, not always easy. It's possible, no? Whereas if we're not trained at all, we just feel we're justified for a start, very often by being angry. Why is he coming this early in the morning without letting me know? I was in the middle of blah, 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 And then was having these repetitive thoughts, say. Then one is totally, been unable to utilize that situation of interaction with another human being. Rinpoche had this great quote, which is, I remember it's up in we had it here for a while. And I think I saw it in Bodh Gaya originally at Root Institute. He said, what's the quote? Imagine or think that the person in front of you is fulfilling all your wishes. Meaning, if you relate properly with the person in front of you in the best way, that's creating cause for your own liberation or enlightenment. Plus, of course, it also means that if you reject that person, there's no way you're going to get enlightened. Because bodhisattvas don't reject anybody. So, yeah, the person in front of you, think that the person in front of you is fulfilling all your wishes. Amazing. Right now, the cake is fulfilling some wishes, but Ji,
Holiness, healing anger,
healing anger, yeah.
possible that spread. And I was also wondering that while we always think that we should practice compassion towards the other, which is true, I think it's also important to practice compassion towards ourselves.
Yes.
There was a very beautiful quote in that, a line in that which said, anger is like holding a charcoal in your hand.
Yeah.
Waiting for the day to throw it to the other person while you burn in the pursuit. So I think it's also very important to have compassion towards yourself
Yeah,
as to what are we doing to ourselves.
absolutely.
But I really love that book. I've read it 3 times, but never really sad. And it's very simple. It's not there.
Healing anger, Rebecca is mentioning by His Holiness, based on the Patience chapter of Shantideva's great text. She's quoting from that book, saying she found it very useful. That anger is like holding a piece of hot charcoal in your hand. And what was the last bit of the quote? And that
Yeah, waiting to throw it to the other person.
waiting to throw it
Yeah,
at
while
the
you're
other person.
burning in the process.
And you're burning your hand in the process.
We're angry at ourselves first before we affect the other person.
Anger is a negative emotion, basically, but people don't realize it
Hmm.
because they are repressed and oppressed inside, from inside. That's why they let it out on others. This happens mostly to men who are married, 50 plus, 60 plus, because inside their houses, women.
Bob is giving a
their wives are
definition of
responsible.
who gets
But when
angry.
They come out, they take out all the frustration, depression, and oppression.
Partly, you're right. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's a fact.
it's a partial fact. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because it's not a psychological test or something. I'm telling you, I've seen it, and it happens everywhere, all over the world.
So you have less chance to get angry if you're not married. Is that right?
Thank God I don't have any. But then though I would have to take it out on other people. That's what old men do. 50 plus, 60 plus.
Old women don't.
Yeah,
Good for them.
that people.
But
Well,
I somewhat agree with the fact that there is a movie also, Fight Club. There's a movie called Fight Club.
Fight Club.
Yeah, yeah. But
Sounds good.
it's a very, I think, a philosophical and also spiritual in certain ways.
Really?
Huh. But it talks about that men should be allowed rough play. So it means that you should let out your anger, and anger is not bad. In a way.
Rugby, football, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, rugby, football, whatever you do.
Boxing.
But not on the other person, not on anybody else.
Oh, not on anybody else.
Yeah.
Just
But in
on.
healthy
Want to
ways.
ask a question? Want to ask?
Huh? Yeah, please. You'll have to speak up or come closer. Mm. Well, if you don't have enough awareness at that moment, sometimes it's just best to keep yourself as far away as possible from the object, if possible. Yeah, that can help. If you can't, then you're in trouble. If we don't have the skill to stop, let go, and yet on the other hand, not suppress it. I think a lot of suppression comes from feeling afraid of the emotion, kind of running away from it, and then it goes inside. I don't know if can we look at something? This is a question. Can we look at something like, say, anger or attachment even, without focusing on the object of the anger or attachment? And just feel the raw emotion. Some teachers say that if one does that, it just disappears. You don't act it out, you don't suppress it, and it just evaporates, because there is actually nothing solid there. We make it solid by thinking about it, worrying about it, or feeling guilty about it, and all of the, the repetitious thoughts we have about it. These things make it appear much more solid than it is, which is, of course, our root problem, is making things solid all the time. So that's one way. The other way, that there's so many things I think we have to put together. We have to realize again and again the shortcomings of anger, and then the more and more we meditate on the suffering of others, how everyone is sick. I find this useful. I'm having good practice with this one in my life right now. When you realize somebody is sick, how can you not expect that person to behave in a certain way? And how can you not develop some kind of empathy for that person? Someone's sick, you want to, help them, not make the problem worse. So we're all sick, right, according to the teaching, and some of us are sicker than others. So those who are sick with whatever behavior that is making one upset, one has to realize it's just a function of their sickness. They can't help it. Of course, we want to say to them, oh, you should get it together, take responsibility. But for now, we're trying to work with our own issue, right, of anger. So that I find very effective. I try to understand. If I don't understand the other person, still I can understand that they are a suffering being. So they are going to, it's quite possible they are going to behave unreasonably or say something unreasonable to me or about a third person or whatever. No, does this make sense? When you really realize someone is sick, one has to really think about it and why Buddha said that, and how we are suffering. How we are suffering is, not just sick, how we are suffering. The frustration of people, etc., etc., just the confusion, the distraction. How there's no abiding peace or joy in most people's minds. That's very sad, no? So then, let it be. Why be angry? Then I guess you have to do more meditation and allow it to come up and embrace it. That's why we need to get more and more adept in meditation, which most of us are not. We can become more and more subtle. We can pick up things. Right now we're very gross, but we don't spend enough time working with these things, so we can never get really subtle enough. Wow, we're getting our value for money today. 2 hours. Not bad. Psychiatrists give you 1 hour, 55 minutes, huh?
45.
Buzz, how much do they charge? I can see good money here.
5 minutes. Psychotherapists give you 45.
Okay, psychiatrists give you 5 minutes.
Maybe 10 if they're generous.
If anybody is interested in free test, I'll give you the address.
Free what?
It's a free test of Oxford capacity test, free. Only free.
Mental test or physical?
Pentology. It's in Nizamuddin next to Tehran. I'll give you the address.
Okay, Bob, thanks.
Totally free.
I was just trying to figure out how much money I could make out of this session. And it's quite a lot. So anyway, enough for today. I also have to rest my voice. It's not very good. So tomorrow we will look at the meditation session, according to Lama Tsongkhapa. And he refutes some misconceptions about meditation. Of course, there are so many. And so we'll do that and maybe get on to precious human life. Yeah. Yeah.
Based on what she was, what I have observed in my life, people who are born Buddhist teachings, but the people who are compassionate and can interface with the other person, that their anger might be coming from a place of suffering, from a place of them not being in a state of well-being. In the long run, we are then taken for granted and we become the object of bullies. And so,
Yeah.
and people also expect us to be the bigger person whenever a confrontation happens, even when they know that the other person is at fault. So, is there any teaching in Buddhism that there's the oppressor or the aggressor needs to be held accountable, just a tiny little bit?
Of course. In the sense that when we speak about compassion, we don't mean idiot compassion. Idiot compassion is when you let people do what they want and you are patient and think you're being patient. That's wrong. If people are really misbehaving or taking advantage of you and others and harming, then it is actually a fault not to engage in some very powerful action to restrain them or correct them. However, it should not be motivated by anger or hatred, by compassion, but it can still be done in a very powerful way. We so much think that compassion has to mean being nice and smiling and all that, and that if you are tough with someone physically, you couldn't possibly be loving and kind at the same time. I think that's wrong. You can be very tough with somebody, but in your mind, you feel for them. You have that compassion, you have the love, but you may be, quite vigorously restraining them or, tying them up even, if that's what they need at that point. So yeah, good point you're making. It shouldn't be a carpet for others. Otherwise they just keep on carrying on in their negative ways. And if our job is to help others be free of suffering, we can't allow them to carry on creating negative karma, because that's creating more suffering for them. So yeah, we must, when necessary, be quite tough, verbally, physically even. The violence depends on the motivation, not so much on the action. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it takes a lot of skill to some midway point between fight and flight. We're just not trained, are we? We hasn't been part of our education. And so we are tormenting each other till the end of our lives. You know, that's what people are doing, due to not having any kind of emotional while people were younger. So anyway, we'll leave it now. There could be umpteen questions, and that's good. Think about some of them. Look at some of the books. Healing Anger is good, though I haven't read it cover to cover. You can read Shantideva, of course, the patience chapter, anything in Shantideva. And those interested could start reading the great treatise. I don't know if it's online. Well, it'll be online for a payment, I guess. But there are many short texts as well on the graduated path, so people could look at them. Or just reflect on what we looked at today, and how much we still remember, how much we already forgot. Anyway, thank everybody. Thank you, people online.
Thank you.
And take care, Jan. Love to Len and others.
Thank you.
And yeah, see you soon. See you, Sandeep ji. Neil, Prashant, Nitin, Nico, thank you all very much. Yash, yeah.